for agreeing to talk with us. We are very much looking forward to hearing your insight and your perspective and your story. And I think this will be very valuable for our transitions toolkit. So thank you. So we'll just go ahead and start. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, tell us your name and where you're from, and about if you could tell us where you were born and whether or not you grew up in the same place that you were born and where you went to school and what you studied and why. So personal portrait.
Okay, well, my name is Rosalie Eldora Cecilia Sindi Medar Gould, but I'm known as Sindi Medar Gould. I was born on the beautiful, absolutely beautiful island of St. Lucia in the Caribbean. And I grew up there until I was 16. And then I left and went to England. I went to school in England for a little while. But I did my university degree at Colorado College in Colorado Springs. I majored in English with a minor in philosophy, focusing on ethics. I did that because, well, for two reasons. One thing, I love the language. I want what people can do with words. And I did philosophy because I wanted to be a lawyer. And I thought that philosophy would give me the training in thinking, in clear thinking and analytical thinking. And at the end, after I've been to law school, I intended to go back to my island and run for parliament. And that was because from the time I was about 8 years old, my mother took me to a political meeting on what we in St. Lucia call the University of the People, which is the Castries Market Steps. And I'm from a family of labor supporters, or I suppose you would call them socialists or Democrats, not Republicans. So that's my political tradition. And I guess that was my introduction to politics. Yeah. And of course, while I was at Colorado College, I joined the Feminist Collective. And in the 60s, being part of the civil rights movement and going to meetings and rallies and demonstrations and so forth, I became a women's rights activist because I didn't like the direction. Somehow we would go out together, but when we came back, the men were all around the table smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee, and we were in the kitchen making sandwiches and resupplying the coffee. And I thought, well, if tomorrow I have to go out there and be, sprayed with water or be running from those dogs, what do you call them, German Shepherds, I should be part of the decision as to why we're going out there. And since, that wasn't happening, I kind of disengaged and joined full-time the feminist movement, and that's how I became a women's rights activist.
That's a very powerful image to think about, the civil rights rallies, and then coming back to the meeting halls and having all the men convene and being the decision makers, and the women who are equally a part of the movement to be in the kitchen.
In the kitchen. Not much has changed.
That's a
in
very
the
powerful
overall
image.
general movement, but
Can you talk a little bit about your family and your background, and do you think your family life helped shape and influence what you're doing today and the work that you've done throughout your life?
Well, I am the mother of one daughter, grandmother of 2, and great-grandmother of 4. My immediate family, my mom, like I said, my mom was the first person to take me to get me involved in politics. And then I had a very powerful education, a male mentor who eventually, he became the Deputy Prime Minister of St. Lucia. And in more recent times, he was the Foreign Minister of my country. And although I live in different places, including the US and England and Nigeria, whenever there is an election in my country, I go home to support my candidate and to mobilize women for voting and for running for office and so on. And so since my mother introduced me, yeah, my folks were supportive, but my mother always insisted on education, particularly for the girls. I have 3 sisters and 3 brothers, and the women were always taught that you need to get an education. It wasn't about being in the kitchen. If you had an education and you had a good job, you could pay somebody else to be in the kitchen, not necessarily a woman either, you know. So yeah, I had that support. And I've raised my daughter also to be conscious. She raised 2 wonderful, very woman-friendly sons. And my eldest grandson, who has four kids, is actually raising them to be very woman-friendly. You ought to see my eldest, my 10-year-old grandson, great-grandson, feed his new sister and burp her and change her, and he just loves doing it. All the boys really love taking care of their little sister, you know. So I think that's from the line of women that I came out of, because my grandmother and my great aunts, they were also powerful in their own context in terms of, well, let me say, the women have always been mavericks in my family. We do what is not expected, and in some instances not accepted either. But we do it anyway because we believe that we have the right to be the best that we can be, and to go into the direction that we think is the right direction, despite what others may say.
Okay, great. You spoke a little bit about this, but maybe you can elaborate about what drew you towards public service and political activism. You talked a little bit about your early childhood, but if you want to elaborate a little bit more.
I think my mom and my grandmother also, they believed in it. They didn't call it public service on it, and it didn't have all the different titles and so on, but that was the way they lived their lives. And for instance, when we cooked at lunch in our house, my mother always insisted that there should be 2 servings more than necessary, in case we never know if somebody will come by, you know, and you just had to feed people because it was part of the things you did. Or if the neighbor, you knew that the neighbor wasn't here, and you saw 12 o'clock come and everybody's eating, and the children of your neighbor are outside playing, you invite them in and you fed them. So I guess I was raised to be a public servant, if you will. And also some of the things that you encounter. When I lived in England in the 60s, it was a racist country, you know. And so either you became active, or you became bitter, or you let events subsume you and define who you are, rather than going out there and saying, look, this is who I am, I'm here. You know, I will not be shrugged to the side. You know, I have a right to be here. You know, especially in England, you people colonized us. You know, And so now we're here, you have to deal with us. You cannot, we're not going to fade into the background, and that's how I suppose public service came in. Because as a student, I started going around talking to other black women and other West Indians in England, saying, look, this is not correct. You cannot just, some of us thought we would go to England just for 4 years, get a degree and go back. And sometimes the degree wasn't coming at, in 4-year intervals. And if you've decided that you're going to make England your home, you need to actually engage with the society in which you live. Otherwise, you're not a citizen, you're a subject. And I was never raised to be a subject, I was raised to be a citizen.
Just to continue on that, do you see the work that you've done over the course of your life as part of the bargain for good citizenship? Do you feel like you're fulfilling your role as a citizen? And if so, what does the state, the government, what do they owe you in return?
I don't consider, I don't like the term a bargain of citizenship. Citizenship comes with rights and responsibilities. And if you want to access rights, you have to fulfill responsibilities. And so it's not a bargain. I think that the responsibilities, when we take on the responsibilities, you need to have good citizens, but you also need good and ethical governance. You need good and ethical governments. You need governments who understand that citizens, that they are servants of citizens. We vote for them, and they owe us the responsibility of doing the things that would make us fulfill our citizenship, if you will. And so I don't see it as a bargain. I don't like that term at all.
So the next question is about women's political participation in Nigeria, and maybe if you could speak to a little bit about how you ended up moving there, and how you ended up living there, and how your life got started there, and then go into if you could provide a little bit of background about women's political participation there.
Oh yeah, well, while I was at Colorado College, I happened to, I was encouraged to take part in a scheme of research. The Watson Foundation offered a year of wonder, how they called it. You design a project to go and you design a proposal to do a project in a country that was not your own. And I had, in my student union days, I met a lot of Nigerians. And I met a lot of men from the north of Nigeria. But the women were invisible because the women weren't there, and I'm thinking, if there are men in northern Nigeria, there must be women. And so I wanted to know, what did these women do? I knew that they were Muslims, mostly Muslims in the north, and I'm like, okay, what lives are Muslim women leading? And so I competed. I did a project to go and study the networking structure amongst Hausa women. That was in 1988. I went to Nigeria. I went for just 1 year. That was what my fellowship was. But when I got there, the Bayero University in Kano offered me space to do my research, and gave me an office. And I noticed that there was a lack of, they needed teachers. And I volunteered to teach English for academic purposes. And then I think I was in Nigeria 1 month, and there was a notice on campus about women in Nigeria, and I thought, oh, since part of my going to Nigeria was also to find out how Nigeria, were there any African feminists, were there any feminists in Nigeria? I had begun to get disillusioned with the, well, not disillusioned per se, but for me, I was, as I said, in the feminist forum, but it no longer suited my needs, and I didn't think that I could transport it to the Caribbean, which is where I wanted to go back and work. And so I thought, let me see what's happening on the continent. And so when Women in Nigeria, I saw their flyer, and the lead paper was going to be about equality and justice, and I went to it, to the opening. And then I stayed for the 3 days, and at the end of the 3 days I joined Women in Nigeria and volunteered with them, and the next year they asked me to be the secretary of the Kano branch. And then they had an AGM, and I was asked to run for the National Executive Committee, and I won as the secretary, but of course I couldn't be the secretary because I was not Nigerian. So on paper I was the assistant